I'm going to talk about bitmapped images today and try to demonstrate that in this simple tutorial. First of all, I'm going to open up a file to actually convert to a bitmap, and I'm going to use this image of myself that many of you have probably seen before. So simply drag it down to Photoshop and it opens up in the complete image in Photoshop. Now it's an RGB file right now. I look into modes and I can see that it is in fact an RGB file. And in order to convert it to a bitmap, you've got to first convert it to a grayscale. So I'm going to actually do that through Actions. And so I'm going to open up Actions, and there's a default action already created in your Actions palette called Custom RGB to Grayscale. So I've selected that, and I'm going to actually just play this action. And the custom action presets are set to 24% red, 68% green, and 8% blue. That's fine in this case. I want a fairly neutral grayscale, and that's what this should produce. So I'm going to click OK, and now I have my grayscale image. This grayscale image is fairly flat, what I call flat, meaning that it kind of lacks in contrast. For better bitmap conversions, you really need contrasty images. So I'm going to up the contrast scale here a bit. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjust Brightness and Contrast, and I'm going to increase the brightness about 50%, and then I'm going to increase the contrast all the way up to 100%. So now I have a considerably more contrasty grayscale image than I had prior, and I'm going to click OK, and that should work for what we're trying to do. Now I'm going to go back up to Image and actually do my mode conversion by going to Mode and clicking Bitmap. This particular image is a small image. It's 72 pixel per inch, which is fine for the web and for screen purposes. It'll be great for my demonstration here today. If you were doing this for print, that resolution should be much higher, probably closer to 300. So we're going to do this and use this 72 pixel per inch image, and I'm going to pick a method. Now, as a bitmap conversion, you have several different methods. You have a 50% threshold, pattern dither, diffusion dither, halftone screen, and custom pattern. I'm going to do 50% threshold the first time around, and we'll talk about each one of these different methods of conversion as we go through it. 50% threshold simply means that it's going to take everything greater than 50% and to change it into black, and anything under 50% and create white out of that. A bitmap is a simple conversion to two color images, white and black. So this gives us, as you can see, a real high contrast. We used to call this a codolith image because the film that was used to do a line shot in a line conversion in the old days of halftone screening and negatives created this real high contrast positive black and white. It's very similar to that. The more contrast you have, the closer to the actual image that you started out with originally it's going to get. As you can see, I've lost a lot of detail on the left or my right side of my face, or the left side of the image here. But down here in the coat, where it was real contrasty because of the texture, it looks a lot like it did in the original image. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and at this point, if I were going to use this type of image, I'd probably do a little bit more. I'd clean it up a little bit more. I might even try to darken my image again and reconvert it to bitmap from the grayscale to try to get a little more detail here on on this side of the face. And I would definitely get rid of these little specks that came out by erasing them. So I'll click the eraser tool, and in this case I'm just going to go to block eraser and just wipe those little elements out and erase them completely out of that image so that I have a nice pure white background to do later color, do whatever I wanted to do with it. Okay, let's look at a different type of conversion. So in this case, I'm going to go to my history palette, and I'm going to go back to my contrasty grayscale version right here, and let's go back up into image mode bitmap and pick a different mode to transform this grayscale into a bitmap. So the next one down is pattern dither. I don't use pattern dither very much myself, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what it does. It basically takes an already preset pattern and disperses it across your grayscale. Instead of a pure black and white, it's still pure black and white, but it's going to try to simulate a denser pattern where it's darker and a lighter pattern where it is lighter on the grayscale. So if we select pattern dither and click OK, you can see we get this. And I'm going to enlarge this so you can kind of see what this pattern actually looks like. It's a blocked pattern, almost like a halftone, but with a real rigid sort of textural pattern on it. Let's go back down. And now let's try a different one. So I'm going to just do a Command Z, which gets me right back to my brightness contrast level on my grayscale. Go back to image mode, go to bitmap again, and in this time we're going to go down to diffusion dither. I like diffusion dither a lot, much more than pattern dither, and basically it looks like a mesotemp pattern or a grain pattern that is dispersed on your grayscale image. So let's look at this in an enlarged version, and you can kind of see how that works. It simulates an irregular halftone to me. That's what it looks like. And I kind of like it, particularly when I want a little more representation on the image and I want to try to get it to look as much like the image as possible. So that's what dither pattern does. So let's go back to a Command Z again and back up to image mode and back to bitmap and move on down the line. Okay, halftone screen. Halftone screen allows us to simulate or actually impart a halftone screen into the grayscale. So let's take a look at that. On halftone scale, there are several different kinds of halftones that you can use. There's a round dot, diamond shaped, elliptical dot, a line screen, a square screen, and a cross screen. So let's start with the top one and do a round screen first. The frequency here will start out by default probably at 72. The higher the frequency, the smaller the dot. If you know anything about halftone screens, and some of you probably do because you've either had pre-press class or we've talked a little bit about it before in class, you know that a newspaper usually runs at about a 65 to 80 line screen or dot size screen. High resolution black and white images are usually, and color images are usually around 150 dots per inch screen. So if in this case, if we did something as high as we could do at 72 pixels per inch or 72 lines per inch, that dot's going to be pretty small, about the size of a newspaper dot. And it's really not going to give us a great effect. Let me show you what that would do. So let's just go to 72, since that's what our resolution is in this case, and keep it around and click OK. Now, we'll have to enlarge it way up for you to be able to literally see these dots. Okay, so that's really too fine for any practical bitmap purposes. I'm going to reduce this back down, and I'm going to do a Command Z and do this again and play with the frequency. So I'm going to go to Image, Mode, Bitmap, and instead of 72, I'm going to go to, let's just say maybe 15. And I'm going to keep, sorry, I'm in the resolution area. You want to keep this one at 72. I got a little ahead of myself. So then we'll click OK. And now we're back into the halftone screen size and the frequency. And now we'll do 15. Okay. And we'll leave the angle at 45 and keep the dot size at round and click OK. Alright, so now you can see it's just pure dots, and if we enlarge that up a little bit, you can see how that works. Now the smaller that I go on that frequency range, the bigger that dot pattern will appear. So let's go one more time here and do a Command Z and go back to Image Mode, Bitmap, halftone screen, click OK, and now we're going to go 8. Okay, and click OK. Now you can see how much bigger that dot pattern is. Alright, so this starts to simulate sometimes when you want to accentuate that halftone dot, like Roy Lichtenstein in his paintings, where he accentuates the halftone dot in his comic book characters on his large-scale fine art paintings. Something like that could be kind of interesting and graphic, and you could easily see where you might be able to use that as a graphic treatment. All right, let's go back again. We convert back to Image Mode, Bitmap, and let's look at different modes of the halftone screen. That first one was round. Diamond and ellipse give you very similar to round. They just change the shape of that dot just a little bit. And so let's skip over those and go to line. And instead of 45 degrees, let's go to 90. Now that's going to give us straight parallel lines, almost like an engraving or an etching. So you can see how that works. All right. Again, just a different technique and something that you could play with and actually work with. The frequency range again would control the number of lines, just like it did in the halftone dot. So I'm going to go back here and let's try a different mode. And bitmap again, halftone screen, and instead of line, let's go to square. I'm leaving the frequency here really low at 8 just so you can see the visual effect, and hopefully you can get the idea of the look that will be created by each one of these modes of conversion. So again, we'll click OK, and now we've got this sort of square pattern almost, which again, and if you changed it from 90 to 45, the angle would go from 90 degrees to a 45 degree, and you could play with that angle and maybe work that into your composition a little bit more. All right, let's do a Command Z again, back to that, mode, bitmap, and this time I think we're about at the end of our possibilities here on the halftone screen. Let's do the cross, and let's change it back to 45 so you can get a visual representation of how this will work. So there you go again. It's really basically like doing that line conversion, but now we've got two counter lines in opposite directions, and in this case they're at a 45-degree angle. Okay, so we'll go back one more time. Image, mode, bitmap, and this time we're going to do the custom pattern, but actually I'm not going to do custom pattern because for custom pattern to actually work, you have to, it's very similar to the pattern dither, but you have to create your custom pattern. And there are some preset custom patterns already in here. We could try one of those and just take a look and see what happens. So this one's very much like the dot pattern, but it's actually throwing that custom pattern over the entire surface, and it's leaving some of that 50% threshold look that we got out of the first one. So it's kind of a combination. Let's revert back by Command Z again. Try one more time here, bitmap conversion, and change the custom pattern to, let's see, let's try this one. There again, it's sort of a combination of a diagonal line plus the 50% threshold. Kind of a nice look. Okay? All right, that's bitmap images. And I think if you've ever been in a situation in the design where you didn't have great photographs to work with, or you simply wanted that real graphic sort of look from your photographs, this is a way to get that. And I hope that you can use that at some time. And it works great, particularly if you're interested in screen printing and you wanted to try to screen print some images. The big halftone dot or any of the line conversions work really well in that kind of printing method. It also just gives you that graphic look. So that's that. This will be on the blog, so you'll be able to see it on the blog and refer back to it. And in that post on the blog, I'm going to show you some other treatments to do or use the bitmap conversion with by changing them back into an RGB and colorizing them in some fashion. So take a look at those examples, and I hope you learned something on this particular demonstration. Thanks.